Good morning. It's so nice to be with you again today. I would rather be with you at 403 West Street, like I was when I told you about my aphantasia. These are different times. How many of you Zoom several times a week? I find my days are literally zooming by. It's not the same as being together, but I appreciate this way of safely staying connected. This talk about cognitive dissonance, Black Lives Matter, and COVID-19 came to me just before Congressman John Lewis died. I watched every minute of that memorial. What a giant of an ordinary man. He had a beacon for a moral compass. May we all find our way to good trouble, which may be out there or in here. The thread weaving my talk together this morning is cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance refers to a situation involving conflicting beliefs. This produces a feeling of mental discomfort, leading to an alteration in one of the beliefs to reduce the discomfort. The theme is the evolution of my thoughts, attitudes, and beliefs with regard to Black Lives Matter. It is a confession of just how entrenched and persistent my childhood beliefs are. It is a chronicle of the inexorable path of change in my beliefs. I'll share some of my personal milestones of my journey, as well as some major insights that fundamentally changed my beliefs on this matter. Finally, I will share what I am going to do about it. I'm not special. In fact, I believe I'm preaching to the choir. I grew up in the fairy tale land of the 50s and 60s. All of the neighborhood kids played kickball and wiffle ball in the street. We played football in the empty lot down the street. In the summer, we left the house in the morning and we had to be back home before dark. TV was full of idyllic families. Father Knows Best, My Three Sons, Ozzie and Harriet. Even the Westerns were heroes and villains, the Lone Ranger, Bonanza. The good guys were good, and the bad guys were bad. I remember the talk we had around Christmas time when Mom and her three ducklings, my big brother and little sister and I, ventured forth into the throngs of people in the mall. Now find a policeman if we get separated. He will take care of you until I find you, Mom would say. It was almost etched in stone in my mind. Policemen were the good guys. They were who I should run to if I felt lost or threatened. I was introduced to cognitive dissonance long before I learned the term. I was 13 in 1964. We were living in Chicago, actually in the suburbs 30 miles south. One Sunday, a young Black minister came to our church and other churches in the area. He described the program he had started with tutoring, drug counseling, sports, and mentoring. He was providing an alternate or an exit from gangs and their cycle of violence. The young minister was Jesse Jackson. His program was growing, but he had a problem. Local police were snatching the young men as they were walking home. They would simply drop them off deep in a rival gang's territory, and they would never make it home. Reverend Jackson was asking for volunteers to simply walk the young men safely home. My dad volunteered. For many months, once or twice a week, He, as well as several other volunteers, would go in different directions, walking many young men home. I know I was distraught. This flipped everything upside down. I knew that gangs were bad, but these gang members were doing the right thing. They were leaving their gangs. The police were now the bad guys, intentionally taking these young men to almost certain death. I was afraid when Dad went off to volunteer. Our household was eerily silent until he would return. I was afraid that the police would hurt or kill my dad. While Dad was a volunteer, I had no conflict of beliefs. There was no denying that Dad was going to a place where the policemen were the danger. It was when Dad was no longer needed that the conflict arose. Policemen are good guys versus policemen are bad guys. The reconciliation in my mind became policemen are good guys, but there are some bad policemen in the Chicago Police Department. That rationalization carried me through many years. There were times that it expanded to other big cities, have some bad cops. Los Angeles, St. Louis, Baltimore. Serious cracks began to form with Trayvon Martin and Eric Gardner, and it was exploded into tiny pieces with the murder of George Floyd. The video of Derek Chauvin, hands in pockets, robotically looking straight ahead with his knee on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, slowly, deliberately choking Mr. Floyd to death is indelibly etched in my mind. The inhumanity of the officer exposed all the levels of systemic racism in the Minneapolis Police Department. Derek Chauvin was teaching 3 new recruits, and this was what he was teaching. In spite of timid questions from the new officers, Chauvin continued kneeling 3 minutes on George Floyd's limp and increasingly lifeless neck. This is what 20-year veteran Chauvin was teaching? Officer Chauvin filed a report of the incident that was not made public. It will probably be made public at the trial. It will be interesting to see how Officer Chauvin wrote up the incident. Officer Chauvin had 17 prior abuse reports, and yet someone in the police department thought he was an appropriate teaching officer. Level upon level, someone thought each lower officer was making appropriate decisions. George Floyd's murder exposed to all Americans the power of police unions that have made it nearly impossible to remove inappropriate officers from the police force. George Floyd's murder exposed to all Americans the prolific use of qualified immunity to protect police officers from their inappropriate behavior's repercussions. Finally, there was a change in culture of policing. It has changed from the protect and serve of my youth. It has changed from protect the good guys from the bad guys to protect white people from black people. I could not avoid my connection with George Floyd. The difference was black and white. George Floyd was killed for possibly passing a counterfeit $20 bill. Many years ago, my wife and I had a weekend yard sale that did very well. Monday morning, I deposited $487 in the bank. The bank only credited $467, and they showed me a $20 bill in a Ziploc bag. They said it was fake. They asked me if I knew anything about it. I had no idea. It could have come from anyone who bought something at the sale. That was it. No police were called. They sent the bill off to the FBI, and I was out $20. But if I had been black, if I had black skin, George Floyd could have been me. I have to thank a hero who I think has not received enough praise, Darnella Frazier. She is the 17-year-old young woman who kept recording even though she was ordered to stop by the police. The truth of that video unassailably countered the lies and statements of the involved officers. It awoke the conscience of millions of Americans of every color. For so long, the word of a policeman versus the word of a black witness has been no contest. But the word of a policeman versus the video is no contest for the majority of Americans. With such visual truth, Black Lives Matter protests swelled and appeared across the nation and the world. Black people always knew Black Lives Matter. This time, white people heard. This time, white people agreed. I know. I was inspired seeing Black Lives Matter protests with 4 white faces for every black face, right in the midst of the largest pandemic in over 100 years. I would have marched, but I'm over 65. Kathy is over 65 and has multiple comorbidities. That is not a good combination. We are choosing to stay at home, wear masks, social distance. This virus is insidious. People without symptoms can transmit the disease. People who have symptoms may not be aware that they have COVID-19 and spread the disease. And people who have the disease can be intentionally spreading the disease. There is no effective treatment, and a vaccine might not be available for another year or 2. I don't think I'm afraid of coronavirus, just like I'm not afraid of malaria or typhus or Ebola. Well, maybe I am afraid of Ebola, terrified even. That is a bug that would give Stephen King nightmares. I do have a healthy respect for coronavirus and know that if I catch it, I have a higher risk of dying. And if Kathy catches it, or if I give it to her, she has an even higher risk of dying. So we are living with the awareness that someone out there can give us this disease that can kill us. We don't know who or where or when. We are living with this heightened awareness for the next year or 2 with the hope that a vaccine returns our life to something close to normal. A week or 2 ago, I was thinking about this. That idea of an unknown, potentially fatal encounter is always out there. Someone, somewhere, sometime, settled in deeply. It changes how I live. It changes how I see others. It changes what I do and how I do it. It was a light bulb moment for me. One of those life moments where head and heart are experiencing life fully in unison. I remember thinking that this is probably the closest that I can come to being a Black person in America. I heard in my heart the talk that every Black mother or father has to give to their teen child. I felt in my heart that they have no vaccine to hope for. I felt that they have lived this awareness for generations. For George Floyd, that unknown person was Derek Chauvin. This has to stop. The time is now. I believe millions of Americans connected with the George Floyd killing with their gut because of the pandemic, whether they were aware of it or not. We cannot make coronavirus go away with legislation. We cannot make it go away by changing policy, but we can make Black Lives Matter by changing our beliefs. We can end our wars by changing policy. We can replace a broken and flawed system of fear and punishment with care and hope. John Lewis said, "When you see an injustice, you must say something. You must do something." So what can I do? What can we do? I can give this talk. I am donating to Black Lives Matter. I am voting for people who will support such change. Some might think, why change? Is our war on drugs working? Is our war on crime working? Is our war on poverty working? Is our war on homelessness working? Well, it does seem like the wars are escalating, but is that what we wanted? Prohibition of alcohol did not work. It just made the mob rich and powerful. Legalize drugs and take the money and power away from drug lords. Drug use is an escape, and drug abuse is an illness. Provide a better reality and treat the illness. A living wage is the cure for poverty and homelessness. We are spending incredible amounts of money on these wars with very little positive effect. The most obvious and consistently growing effect is the disenfranchisement of more and more people of color. I do not personally like the term defund the police, but I firmly believe that we can and need to do much better with the money and human resources we are using. The whole idea of wars on this or that polarize and set up conflict between the people and the police, a warrior culture. The term public safety has come up as a possibility where policing is one part of public safety, as well as fire and counseling and drug rehabilitation and mental health. It's not right for our police to wear all of those hats. What if we had public safety professionals responding with the help that was needed? What if we all knew that policemen are the good guys we ran to when we felt threatened. I think that is what the vast majority of policemen want as well. Black Lives Matter. They have been holding up those signs for many years, asking that question. For so many years, we have answered, not yet. Apparently, it took a pandemic for thousands and thousands of white Americans to hold up their Black Lives Matter signs and say yes. What is your answer? Do you see the injustice? What do you say? What do you do? It's up to you. Namaste.